All right. Hey there, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, DOT Medical Exams, the process, disqualifications, red flags, and what to do after obtaining a medical card. Just real quick, why are we doing this webinar? Let's do a quick overview. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, the FMCSA, requires all drivers of commercial motor vehicles, CMVs, to pass an FMCSA physical to obtain a DOT medical card. This is the medical exam. Beyond traditional trucking companies, there's construction companies, local delivery, moving companies, people transporting of 8 to 15 passengers, and distribution companies that are transporting goods in delivery-sized trucks instead of larger semi-trucks qualify to get a medical card. And because of this large group of people needing medical cards, we're finding that medical card questions are baffling some of those responsible for qualifying commercial drivers. So in this webinar today, we will dive into the exam process, what are the automatic disqualifications, what are some red flags, even around marijuana misuse, and what to do after obtaining a medical card. A little bit about myself. I'm Luke Kibbe. I'm going to be your moderator and speaker today. I am the marketing manager for Clean Fleet, which is a best-in-class consortium TPA and collection sites serving the drug testing industry nationwide for over 20 years. As a leading CTPA, Clean Fleet staff includes those who have been certified as DERs and professional collector trainers by DAISHA, the Drug and Alcohol Testing Industry Association. And personally myself, I've been writing on the drug testing industry and compliance with the DOT regulations for years now. My article actually on the DOT Clearinghouse is going to be featured on the cover of the next DAISHA magazine. Should be coming out next month. And I also manage the marketing department at our sister company, Glowstone Trucking Solutions, that focuses on helping companies nationwide stay compliant with DOT and FMCSA regulations. So I do quite a bit of stuff in diving into the regulations. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention a couple housekeeping items. This webinar is interactive, so I'm going to mute your phones, but please submit your questions in the chat box as they pop up, as you think of them. I'm going to keep an eye on them during the presentation, but we'll have a Q&A session at the end where I can answer them. Lastly, you'll receive the presentation and the link of the recording after the webinar, so keep an eye out on your email tomorrow. With that, let's go ahead and dive in. So who needs a DOT medical exam? Good question. The DOT medical exam stands for Department of Transportation. It's the physical examination and is required for all licensed commercial drivers in the U.S. and must be performed by an approved doctor of medicine. The Department of Transportation requires this test to ensure commercial drivers remain healthy enough to work out on roads behind the wheel of a vehicle. The FMCSA requires all drivers of CMVs, commercial motor vehicles, to pass an FMCSA physical to obtain a DOT medical card. So before we go further, let's look at what the FMCSA considers a commercial motor vehicle for the purposes of requiring a medical card. In Part 390.5 of the FMCSRs, it defines a CMV as any self-propelled or towed motor vehicle used on a highway in interstate commerce to transport passengers or property when the vehicle is designed or used to transport more than 8 passengers, including the driver, for compensation, or is designed or used to transport more than 15 drivers, including the driver, and is not used to transport passengers for compensation. If you operate a vehicle for interstate commerce purposes, if you drive a vehicle that weighs over 10,001 pounds, and if you are responsible for transporting hazardous materials. And like I said in the introduction, beyond traditional trucking companies with long-haul freight, construction companies, local delivery, moving companies, people transportation of 8 to 15 passengers, distribution companies that are transporting goods in delivery-sized trucks, they all must get a medical card. You can see the different vehicle configurations in the image on the slide here, where the different types of construction vehicles that might weigh over 10,001 pounds, and etc. So they are all qualified to get a medical card, which includes that physical exam. So what's checked at your DOT exam? The doctor performing your medical examination must find you are physically and mentally qualified to safely operate a motor vehicle in order for you to receive an improved medical examiner's certificate. The first thing they check is for the driver's health history. As you can see on the form here, there's quite a few questions in the health history section. When your driver arrives at the exam, they're going to be asked to fill out a form that details their health history and current health, including all medications they're taking. And once this is completed, they'll survey you. Once you complete this survey, you will be thoroughly examined by the doctor. When you do fill out the driver history survey, you must answer all questions honestly. It is against the law to lie on a health survey, and when talking to a doctor, you really should be completely honest as well. We'll talk about some repercussions that comes up when people lie on their exam forms. But before that, there's really two questions I want to point out that we're going to discuss later too. It's question 31 and 32. It's the last two at the end, and it's specifically regarding illegal drug use. And like I said, we're going to talk more on that regarding marijuana use, but it is still a Schedule I drug federally, and just be sure to answer those questions honestly, and we'll talk about what kind of issues pop up around those two questions. The second part, the second half of the form is going to be the health basics. This is the main part of the health exam, physical exam. Your vision, hearing, blood pressure, and other laboratory findings will be recorded in order to present a report for overall health. All the basics are checked, including your general appearance and demeanor, ears, eyes, throat, mouth, heart, lung, chest, abdomen, liver. I think you guys get the picture, but really, they also even look for neurological and extremities, which noting any loss or limbs of your physical abilities. We'll talk about some of the exemptions that pop up, as well as where you can get qualified if another person qualifies you with that exemption. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But the doctor also needs to know things such as if you have a pacemaker implanted or if you even suffered a heart attack in the recent past. The purpose of this exam is to ensure your safety and the safety of others. The CDC must know that all commercial drivers out on the road are healthy enough to pose no serious risk to other drivers, passengers, or themselves. There's a lot of trust given to transporters of heavy vehicles because these vehicles can cause a lot of damage if anything were to happen for an accident. Specifically, commercial transportation involves long hours at a time and often at odd hours of the day or night. And so this requires a certain mindset, which is why the exam requires a doctor assess you for healthy mental state of mind. This includes any substance abuse issues as well as current medications you are taking, as I mentioned before. Actually, before we do move on, your physical body is also taken into consideration regarding your overall health and level of fitness. It's common for commercial drivers to lift heavy loads from time to time, and so the ability for you to do so safely is also taken into consideration. If you are advised against any sort of lifting or heavy exertion, this might be a concern, but not necessarily a deal breaker, like I mentioned about some of the exemptions. The loss of limb may be subject to disqualification unless you have a skill performance evaluation certificate from a medical doctor. So now let's talk about some of the automatic disqualifications regarding your medical exam. By regulation in the FMCSA, specific medically disqualified conditions can be found under 49 CFR Part 391.4.1, and they are hearing loss, vision loss, and regarding vision specifically, if you do not have a correctable 20/40 vision in both your left and right eyes, that's what disqualifies you. But you may wear glasses or contact lenses. They are correctable. And if you wear corrective eye lenses, they will be noted on your certificate in detail. Other automatic disqualifications include epilepsy, insulin use to treat diabetes, and if you take any habit-forming drugs, including narcotics and amphetamines. Drivers who require a diabetes or vision exemption to safely drive a CMV, in addition to those pre-printed on the certification form, are disqualified until they receive such an exemption. So regarding vision specifically, the federal or the FMCSA's vision exemption program is for monocular vision. The vision exemption is issued for a maximum of 2 years and is renewable. The driver must be otherwise qualified under the FMCSRs or hold another valid medical exemption to legally operate a commercial motor vehicle in interstate commerce. Provisions of the vision exemptions include an annual medical examination and an eye examination by an ophthalmologist or an optometrist. At the annual recertification exam, the driver should present the current vision exemption and a copy of the specialist's eye examination report. The medical examiner doing your physical exam will certify the qualified driver, usually for 1 year, and issue a medical examiner's certificate with the accompanied by, in quotations, exemption checkbox marked and write vision to identify the type of federal exemption. The motor carrier is responsible for ensuring that the driver has the required documents before driving a commercial vehicle. The driver is responsible for carrying both the vision exemption and the medical examiner's certificate while driving and keeping both current and up to date. So let's quickly move on to some red flags for temporary disqualifications. Medical examiners are given guidelines, a long list of guidelines for when they may temporarily disqualify a driver during their physical exam. We'll just cover two more common ones today. The first one is cardiovascular. Disqualification from an examiner requires that the CMV driver exhibits a higher than acceptable likelihood of acute incapacitation from a cardiac event, resulting in an increased risk to the safety and health of the driver and the public. And this is obviously doctor language, and there's some different guidelines that they have to help with this discretion that they're looking into. They will explain why you might be temporarily disqualified or even permanently disqualified from getting the certificate during this exam. For physiological disorders, some psychological or personality disorders can directly affect memory, reasoning, attention, and judgment. And disorders of a periodically incapacitating nature, even in early stages of development, may warrant disqualifications. So just another note there. Like I was saying, when the disqualification condition or treatment is made, especially if the examiner has a clinical course where they're telling you what you can do to fix the treatment or the condition, that is likely to restore the driver's medical fitness for duty. The examiner should discuss this disqualification decision with the driver, including what the driver can do to meet the federal qualification requirements for commercial drivers. When a recommended waiting period is applicable, like you can see on this form, they'll put in a date that should be greater than or equal to the waiting period. I'll go into that in a second. Or should be greater or equal to the longest waiting period when the driver has multiple medical conditions that might need to get fixed before he can authorize it. So in other words, for various conditions, examiners are given recommended lengths of time it usually takes to resolve various conditions. So it's like I said, it's a long list of various conditions and recommended lengths of time to fix them. And when noting on your report to fix the condition, it should be equal or greater to that recommended time waiting period. In these cases, the medical examiner will not issue a medical examiner certificate, and the driver is disqualified and not allowed to operate a CMV until a medical examiner finds the driver to be medically fit for duty. I do want to do a quick pause and discuss doctor shopping. You might have heard that phrase before. It used to be a bigger issue in the past with the new certified medical examiners that going through the online process of finding a medical examiner and their whole getting authorized to do these DOT physical exams. It's become less often an issue with doctor shopping, but drivers or companies may try to doctor shop to find, in essence, a second opinion. If you've been red flagged and there's a temporary disqualification, they might try to look for someone else to just pass it, just ignore it, and sign you off. Please note that when two doctors who do a physical exam for one driver within a short period of time, they have to upload these qualifications into the database, and this can signal a red flag to the FMCSA, which may investigate the information more closely and might cause more issues than just a temporary disqualification. So just a quick note. Of course, everybody else here is I'm sure, great drivers or have great drivers in their companies, so that doesn't happen. There is an issue. I know a lot of people who've signed up for this aren't traditionally trucking companies, and so I want to mention non-CDL drivers of CMVs and that they're being denied medical cards, and really why. It's because of marijuana and marijuana use. And let's talk about that. So although some states have legalized recreational and medical marijuana, in August of 2016, the DEA announced that marijuana would remain a Schedule I drug under the Controlled Substance Act. So it's federally still a Schedule I drug. For companies that employ drivers who operate commercial motor vehicles as defined as Part 390.5 of the FMCSRs, this is leading to confusion about whether drivers operating CMVs that do not require a commercial driver's license, if they can legally use marijuana where it is legal in that state. The issue arises because the FMCSA requires all drivers of CMVs to pass this physical in order to obtain the medical card. But many industries have employees who need qualified that are non-CDL drivers. And so the construction industry is a great example because there's many large vehicles like dump trucks and concrete mix trucks, and many construction companies need qualified CMV drivers in order to drive a pickup truck that is even hauling a load of stone or gravel or equipment, and that even comes up with landscapers as well. And another group includes local delivery and moving companies, bus companies, where and even distribution companies transporting local delivery sized vehicles. And really the issue comes, like we said, all drivers have to pass that physical exam and get their med card, but since drivers who operate CMVs do not require the DOT drug testing that CDL drivers need, some employers believe it's legal for them to use marijuana in the states that allow it. And this, you see the two questions that we mentioned earlier. This is where the issue comes up. And so Part 391 of the FMCSR state that the use of Schedule I drugs by a driver is an automatic disqualification from operating a CMV. There are two ways that a CME the examiner, can disqualify a driver for using Schedule I drugs. And the first way is when a driver admits use on these federal forms. Again, federal forms that she or he fills out before the physical. The form that the driver fills out has these two questions. The first one, number 31, have you used an illegal substance within the past 2 years? If you answer yes, it's usually an automatic disqualification. Have you ever failed a drug test or been dependent on an illegal substance? Again, there's repercussions when answering honestly, yes. The first question is referring to the federal Schedule I drug, including marijuana, as we mentioned. Until that's not a Schedule I drug anymore, it's still an issue. So if the driver marks yes, they are automatically disqualified and will not receive their medical card. If the driver marks yes on the second question, which is referring to a failure of a drug test, if they've failed a drug test in the past, the driver is not automatically disqualified. However, some medical examiners may want the driver to take a non-federal drug test. And that's, again, specifically where the issue comes up. They're not required by the smaller truck drivers, in essence, are not qualified, don't have to take a drug test as CDL drivers do. But in the second scenario, the examiner might ask for you to give a urine sample to pass the drug test. And that's where the issue comes in. So this type of request is similar to any other type of request an examiner may take for issuing a medical card, such as a sleep study for a sleep apnea. You need to follow that before you can get certified. So both situations have actually come up in our own clinics. For example, we had a driver come in last December for a DOT physical who had an extreme weight loss in a short time frame and other characteristics that indicate drug use. And our medical examiner wanted the driver to take a drug test, which had non-negative results. As such, the driver did not qualify for a medical card to drive the CMV. So this is some real life. It's a real life example that we've been seeing. And in this scenario, what happens if a non-CDL driver fails the drug test? Employers and drivers should understand that a CME, the examiner, cannot order a drug test to be done under the authority of the DOT. It's a non-DOT test. So drivers who test positive during these tests aren't subject to the requirements of a failed drug test by the DOT. Failing a drug test ordered by the examiner automatically disqualifies them from the medical card and thus prohibits them from operating CMV, but failing a drug test under the authority of the DOT, the driver does not have to see a substance abuse professional, a SAP, or be part of a follow-up program that CDL drivers are regulated to be a part of, unless the individual company requires them to do so. So a lot of little changing hands there, and whose policy, whose rules are being met. But it is important to note that if a driver has a CDL, it's operating a commercial motor vehicle that requires a CDL. So for example, if he's driving a dump truck one day and has a CDL license, but he's just driving a dump truck, and he goes and drives a long-haul truck, the employer has actual knowledge of drug use and will need to perform a random drug test, a DOT reasonable suspicion drug test on that driver. So there's, again, certain situations where drug tests might pop up during certain situations. So it's a lot of fun. The regulations are fun. Also, drivers who fail non-DOT drug tests will have their information in the upcoming DOT clearinghouse. This is the database that holds they're not going to have their information in the DOT clearinghouse. This database that's coming up is only going to hold positive results or refusals for DOT drug tests. So a little bit more, if the driver lies on the form that we mentioned and is caught in a DOT investigation, maybe being caught trying to doctor shop, like we mentioned before too, in order to find a medical examiner to give them a med card. The form they are filling out states submission of fraudulent or intentional false information may be subject to civil or criminal penalties under 49 CFR 386 and 390.37. And based on the federal form, the driver may have to wait 2 years in order to get their med card, otherwise be subject to penalties. So that's where a lot of strict rules come in there, and they're trying to prevent that doctor shopping. All right, back to, again, the basic here. So choosing a certified medical examiner. 2014 was the implementation of the National Registry of Certified Medical Examiners. It's the online database. It was designed to improve the DOT physical exam process, ensure that medical examiners understand FMCSA regulations and guidance for issuing medical certificates. So just making sure the people know the DOT rules when they're doing your exam. Medical examiners wishing to be listed in the database must now undergo extensive training and testing before being registered, and every 5 years and thereafter. The training ensures doctors have a thorough understanding of the life of a truck driver and the unique operating equipment environment associated with it. And so medical examiners are given detailed explanations of 12 physical qualification categories listed in the federal regulations. They're also provided with FMCSA approval medical guidance that I've sort of mentioned before, and medical advisories that they're encouraged to follow. The result of this new database, with the additional training comes heightened awareness of potential liability concerns medical examiners face when determining if a driver is qualified. So as a result, many drivers have seen more scrutiny during examinations these last few years than they've had before 2014. And particular attention for many of these examiners has been paid to obstructive sleep apnea, and that's been in the news big time. And I'm not going to go into detail on it today, but there's been a result of misinterpretation of these medical requirements. And so the ATA did develop some questions you should ask a medical examiner. I'm not going to dive into those today, but I can email them out if you're curious about sleep apnea. But before you choose your medical examiner, you should ask yourself these 3 questions. Am I okay with a physician telling me that one of my drivers or potential drivers is not fit to drive? Am I willing to either work with that driver to get him fit, or to part ways with the driver? And is ensuring the safety of the driver and other drivers on the road more important than just certification or approval? If you've answered yes to all 3, you may want to use Clean Fleet here in our Portland area clinics to be your resource for DOT medical exams. We have a big thing with trust, honesty, no conflict of interest with our examiners, and a commitment to safety. And this is what makes us different. And before scheduling your next exam, make sure you see your medical examiner's name on the National Registry's website if you haven't done so in the recent past. If you're unable to find the medical examiner on the database, he or she is not certified, and you should select another practitioner. I do want to mention, it's something that popped up in the news today. Beware of trying to cheat the system. Again, everybody online right now probably isn't trying to cheat the system, but certified medical examiners sometimes get caught issuing bogus medical cards, and that leaves your drivers needing to renew their DOT medical certifications. In fact, so today CCJ reported that more than 600 truck operators have been told they need to renew their DOT medical certificates after an arrest of a Georgia-based medical examiner. And this person was recently arrested by the DOT investigators for allegedly issuing bogus medical certifications. And according to DOT press release, investigators found that she routinely signed medical reports for CDL holders without performing medical exams on the drivers. That's sort of like that doctor shopping kind of thing. She's been charged with falsification of records and intent to impede proper administration of the DOT. She's been removed from the Registry of Examiners, and all those drivers now need to quickly find a new examiner, get a new card, and if they pass, who knows how many of them were either trying to cheat the system or maybe something else popped up, health issues. They might be, it might cause quite a few companies to lose their drivers for a while if the driver can't pass that medical exam. There was another case last year where a doctor was performing tests at a petrol truck shop in Atlanta and potentially issued thousands of bogus medical cards there as well. So it's a real issue that's out there. You need to be sure you trust your doctors. A little bit about there's some research that came out, actually it's about like a week ago, the impacts of National Registry on the database, how well it's been going, or some interesting facts that came out of the research. And so ATRI and Mayo Clinic recently collaborated on this research to examine the impacts of this registry for examiners. And as part of this research, they surveyed 900 commercial drivers, 300 motor carriers, and 1,200 examiners to better understand the impacts of this database has had on the trucking industry since implemented in 2014, and designed specifically to improve the DOT physical exam process and to ensure medical examiners understand the FMCSA regulations and guidance. And their research found 4 interesting points that I wanted to bring up here. And the first one's a majority of drivers, over 63%, reported increased exam costs, while only 6% of the drivers actually reported improved exam quality. So it seems like the cost went up because of some of the issues that might happen with the certification of getting certified, but the improved exam really hasn't shown up. Also, 6% of drivers reported spending 20 minutes or less during the exam. This is that physical exam, with 6.5% of those percent of those drivers spending 10 minutes or less, which is insufficient time to complete all required processes of a DOT physical. So there are still cases where the examiners aren't doing what is needed to be done to qualify examiners. Among the about 6% of drivers who were not issued a medical certificate on the day of the exam, 22.5% of those cited having a medical condition that required treatment before certificate issues as the reason. And then finally, nearly 50% of motor carriers reported that they specify which examiner their drivers see to ensure medical exam quality. So that at least half of motor carriers are doing, making sure they're going to the person they want to go to, that maybe they trust. Half of them might not be. Finally, let's get back into right here. So one of our examiners at one of our clinics created a list of what information is needed for a physical exam. So are your drivers ready for their physical exams? They go much smoother for both the examiner and the driver when drivers are prepared. And if you have a question about a condition and the necessary requirements, please, you can email me or call me and ask for some more specifics of what you might need to bring in for the exams. Just let us know. But don't wait last minute to take time to acquire these supporting documents. The driver gets back on the road faster, and it decreases the necessity for return visits or delays in getting med cards. If you don't have a document that they need, you have to leave, go get it, come back, and then have the exam a second day. The basic list needed at a physical exam. So let's go over these real quick. So bring in your medication list if you have medications. You can bring in a paper or electronic copy. It needs to have the doctor's name, address, and phone number as well for those medications. If you have corrective lenses, bring in the corrective lenses. If you have hearing aids, bring in the hearing aids. Recent lab results for diabetes maintenance. Also, cardiovascular testing results for heart conditions of any kind. So EKGs, stress tests, echocardiograms, and or the letter of from cardiovascular specialists to verify that condition is not detrimental to driving. Also bring in, with use of a CPAP machine for sleep apnea, a compliance printout is necessary. It must be for 30 days. And the letters of release after an injury from the treating physician. Bring all these things in, it'll make the whole process of the exam much smoother. So after everything, you got certified. How long is a DOT exam valid? A DOT exam is considered relevant and valid for up to 24 months. The medical examiner has the right to create a certificate that is effective for less than 24 months. So once you've filled out the form, completed your exam, the doctor will go over every concern with you. If you're approved with no concerns, you're going to get that full 24 months. If your examiner thinks you're overall fit and healthy but has some concerns, they may issue a certificate valid for 3 months, 6 months, or however long they see fit. And then you'll have to go back in and get another medical exam. If standards are not met, your health examiner will not be able to give you a medical certificate. Sort of makes sense. So just be aware that you can receive a medical exam less than that 2 years. All right, so you got your medical exam being passed and certified. What do you do? The first thing you need to do is the driver needs to take the medical card to the DMV when applying for a CDL or if they're updating that existing medical expiration date. It usually need to do this within 15 to 30 days. Every state has their own interesting rules, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, but it's important to note that if any of the information on your medical card is not legible, the doctor writing on it and it's not legible, if it's incorrect or missing, something wasn't filled out, you may receive a letter notifying you that you must have your medical certificate corrected and refaxed, emailed, or mailed, or brought in personally to the DMV after it was fixed. So the side note here, some states may not accept mailed, faxed, or emailed medical certificates. Some may offer one, some may offer all the ways of being able to give that medical certificate to the DMV. But one state specifically, Missouri, does not accept any of those methods, and only the actual certificate in paper form is accepted from their DMV. Also, California and Florida have some unique rules that require additional steps to be done, so you can always let us know about those. But if you don't want to deal with those various state requirements for your drivers, especially if you might have you have many locations across in the nation, let Clean Fleet do this for you. We have the two best-in-class collection sites and our medical examiners here in the Portland metro area, and we can handle most of those DMV submissions for you, obviously not the Missouri one, because that's got to be done in person. And it's crazy to think about. If we had someone come into our clinic, we'd have to tell them, go back over there and get it done, and you have to get it done within 15 to 30 days so to submit that to the DMV. But the second thing you must do after you get a medical card, the employer needs to pull the MVR, the motor vehicle record, within 15 days after the driver exam. The DOT requires that new medical card information be immediately reported to the DMV and become part of the motor vehicle record, and it's why the MVR must be pulled. It's been updated, so now a new one must be pulled. The updated MVR is required to be placed in your driver qualification file and can be audited by the DOT. Our sister company, Glowstone Trucking Solutions, can do that whole process for you for all your drivers and save you a trip or many trips to the DMV. So I can email you some of the information tomorrow when I give you guys the recording of the link. But almost wrapping up. Again, if you have some questions, feel free to write them in now. I'm going to go over some of the common questions when getting a medical card, and then we'll move into Q&A time. So think about the questions you've had, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. So first, does a driver need a new physical after returning from a medical leave of absence? And really, a driver's medical card needs to be renewed every 2 years, or whatever the time left is on your medical card. So if there is time on a driver's medical certificate, the FMCSA leaves the choice of being recertified to the motor carrier. If the company wants them to get recertified, even though there might be a month or two left on their card, they can send them in, but they don't have to. If a driver's medical qualifications come into question at any time, though, the driver is supposed to go in for a new exam, and that's based on Section 391.45, and only a certified medical examiner has the authority to declare the driver medically unqualified. Second question, do we need a non-CDL driver's motor vehicle record as proof of a physical? No, a non-CDL driver's current medical status will not appear on his or her motor vehicle record. And thank you guys for the comments on the chats, by the way. Federal regulations only require state driver's licenses agencies to monitor and track the medical status of the CDL driver that have self-certified as non-accepted interstate or intrastate drivers. Non-accepted simply means that they're subject to driver physicals. Third question, do we need a new MVR? Does the driver need a new MVR, or the company, after each physical? Yes. So if they are told you need to come back in, we're going to pass you, but only for 3 months, and you have to come back in, you're going to need to pull a new MVR after that 3 months. If it's 6 months, same thing. So the CDL driver needs the MVR within 15 days of any new driver physical. This includes the medical cards issued for, like I just said, for the short duration. So for example, if your CDL driver is giving you that 3 to 6 months, I don't know why I'm repeating myself, but I am. Last thing, do we need to retain a copy of the federal medical card in the DQ file? For non-CDL drivers, like I said, more for the construction companies that are doing smaller vehicles, if it's never going to be in if you don't need a CDL, you must keep a copy of the federal medical card in file for 3 years following the exam, along with a note that you verified the status of a medical examiner on the National Registry of on that National Registry. For CDL drivers, you only need to retain the federal medical card as temporary proof in the DQ file until you receive that MVR reflecting the newest exam. So you must have this MVR in the file within 15 days, like we mentioned, along with a note that you checked the database that it was a certified medical examiner. Both the MVR and that database note are kept for 3 years then. And with that, we're going to move into Q&A time. I don't see any questions right now, so I'm going to wait just a couple more seconds. I do see someone typing, so I'll wait a little bit. Again, thank you guys for joining today. I know I think one of you works for a school district, so I don't know if that's working with bus companies, but with bus drivers. But yep, looks like no other questions. So I'm just going to go ahead and end the webinar. I'm going to please look forward for the email. It should tomorrow. I'm going to work on it today, but tomorrow you should get the email of this recording. I'll get you the slides. And thanks for attending, and we'll hopefully see you next month. Have a great rest of your day.